Hi everyone. My name's Emily Carter, and I'm 33 years old. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to share my life story online, but here I am, typing out something that's been sitting heavy on my chest for years. Maybe because deep down, I want people to know that sometimes the ones who are supposed to love you the most can be the very people who clip your wings before you even have a chance to fly. So here it goes. When I was younger, I lived for colors. Not in the casual way most kids do, like crayons on a page or doodles on the back of a notebook. No, for me, colors felt alive. They spoke. They carried moods, whispers, secrets. I could stare at a cloudy sky and feel its sadness seep into me, then spend hours trying to capture that ache on paper. And why parents didn't see any of that. I grew up in a strict, middle-class household in Ohio. My dad, Michael, was a numbers guy. He worked in accounting and believed in stability above all else. My mom, Patricia, was practical to her core. She thought anything that couldn't guarantee a paycheck every 2 weeks wasn't worth the sweat. I was their only child. Which you'd think might mean they'd nurture me, spoil me a little, encourage me. Instead, I felt like I was raised in a constant state of expectation that I'd be the success story of the family. The one who'd make them proud at reunions, who'd climb ladders in some corporate tower, who'd have the kind of job title people respected at cocktail parties. Art didn't fit that vision. I'll never forget one particular evening. I must have been 16. I had just spent 3 days painting this massive canvas I bought with babysitting money. It was abstract, swirling shades of blues and silvers, something that felt like a storm crashing inside me. I carried it to the kitchen, proud, hopeful. "Look, Mom, Dad," I said, my voice cracking just slightly. "This is what I've been working on." My dad didn't even look up from the newspaper. He muttered, "That's nice, Emily." Flat. Detached. The way someone reacts when you tell them you brushed your teeth. But my mom, she set her glass of wine down and stared at me in that sharp way of hers. "Emily, don't you think it's time to stop wasting so much time on this? You're smart enough for law or medicine. Even business. Something real. Painting won't pay the bills." The word wasting burned. I remember gripping the edges of the canvas so hard my knuckles went white. "Mom," I whispered, "it's not a waste. This is me." She sighed, leaned back in her chair, and said with this cold finality, "Then maybe you are the waste." I didn't cry in front of her. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. But later that night, when I was alone in my room, I buried my face into the pillow and sobbed until my chest ached. That became the rhythm of my teenage years. Every time I created something, I'd feel this fire, this unstoppable current. Then I'd take it home, show them, and watch the light dim under their judgment. Still, I couldn't stop. By the time college applications rolled around, the battle lines were drawn. They wanted me at Ohio State for accounting. I wanted New York for art school. The fights were brutal. Shouting matches that left me trembling. My dad's face red, veins bulging in his forehead. My mom crying dramatically, claiming I was throwing my future away. One night, my father slammed his fist against the dining table so hard the dishes rattled. "Do you think you're better than us, Emily? You think your silly little paintings will buy you a house? Feed a family? Grow up." I snapped. Years of bottled hurt exploded out of me. "Maybe I don't want your version of a life. Maybe I'd rather starve painting than rot behind some desk, living a life that isn't mine." The silence afterward was deafening. My mom stood slowly, her face pale. She pointed toward the stairs. "Go to your room. We'll discuss this when you're calm." But I wasn't calm. I was alive, electric, determined. For the first time, I saw the truth. Their love was conditional. It depended on me being who they wanted me to be, not who I was. That night, lying in bed, I made a promise to myself. I would go to New York. With or without them, and that's exactly what I did. The day acceptance letters arrived, I held mine with trembling hands. I had been admitted to the School of Visual Arts in New York City. My heart soared. I expected at least some pride from my parents. Maybe not joy, but acknowledgement. Instead, my dad folded the letter neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and said, "We're not paying for this nonsense. If you go, you're on your own." I was 18. Barely an adult. But in that moment, something hardened in me. "Fine," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I'll do it myself." The months that followed were hell. I worked 2 part-time jobs, saved every penny, applied for scholarships. I sold sketches online, painted murals for local cafes, even did portrait commissions for neighbors who wanted cheap gifts. Every dollar felt like defiance. Every stroke of the brush, a middle finger to their lack of faith. When I finally boarded that Greyhound bus to New York, a single suitcase in hand and barely $400 in my bank account, I looked back at my parents' house one last time. The curtains were drawn. No one came out to say goodbye. That was the last day I ever felt like their daughter, but it was also the first day I truly felt like me. When I first stepped off that Greyhound bus in New York City, I felt like I was both the smallest and the bravest person alive. The air smelled like hot asphalt, exhaust fumes, and the faint sweetness of roasted nuts from a street cart. The sidewalks pulsed with people who seemed to know exactly where they were going, while I clutched my single suitcase like it was the only anchor I had left. I had $412 in my bank account, no safety net, and parents who had basically disowned me the second I chose art over accounting. But I also had something else, a fire in my chest that told me I'd rather starve chasing this dream than live comfortably in a cage. That fire, though, it dimmed faster than I expected. The first apartment I rented wasn't even really an apartment. It was a showbox-sized room in a crumbling building in Queens, shared with 3 other art students who were just as broke and stubborn as me. My room was actually half of the living room sectioned off by a thin curtain. Behind it, I had a mattress on the floor, 2 plastic bins for clothes, and a stack of canvases leaning against the wall. Every night, I'd hear the muffled sounds of the subway rumbling nearby, the neighbors arguing in Spanish, or my roommates coughing through the draft that crept in through the cracked window. And yet, when I lay on that thin mattress staring up at the ceiling, I felt oddly free. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't safety. But it was mine. The reality of art school hit harder than I expected. Professors who seemed more interested in tearing us down than building us up. Endless assignments. The pressure to constantly create something new, something that didn't feel derivative, something that screamed originality. I remember one particular critique session. I had stayed up 3 nights in a row working on this oil painting, pouring every ounce of my soul into it. It was a self-portrait, but fractured, my face split into shards of glass, each piece showing a different emotion. Anger. Sadness. Hope. When it was my turn to present, I stood there trembling, my hands stained with streaks of blue paint. My professor, a wiry man with round glasses, studied it for a long time. Then he said flatly, "Derivative. You're trying too hard to be deep." The class chuckled. My face went hot. My stomach sank. That night, I sat in the campus cafe with my sketchbook open, staring at the blank page. For the first time, I wondered if my parents had been right. Was I wasting my time? Was I chasing a dream that would break me? But then I caught sight of another student across the cafe, a girl sketching with this raw, messy energy. Her lines weren't perfect. They weren't even neat. But they were alive. And I realized I wasn't here to impress professors. I wasn't here to be perfect. I was here to be. I picked up my pencil and drew until my wrist ached. Money was always the shadow hanging over me. I worked nights at a diner, slinging greasy burgers and milkshakes to tourists who never tipped. On weekends, I stood in Central Park sketching quick portraits for $5 a pop. Some people ignored me. Some laughed. But every once in a while, someone's eyes would light up when I handed them their portrait, and for a moment, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was worth something. Still, there were nights I went to bed hungry, stomach growling, because rent came before food. I learned to stretch a bag of rice into a week's worth of meals. I drank free coffee refills at the diner to keep myself awake during late-night painting sessions, and I'll admit it, there were nights I cried myself to sleep. Nights I missed the comfort of a real bed, or the sound of my mom humming in the kitchen, or even my dad's heavy footsteps down the hall, but pride kept me from calling them. I refused to give them the satisfaction of hearing me beg. One winter, during my second year, I hit my lowest point. I had been working 2 shifts back-to-back at the diner, and when I got back to my apartment, my roommates were gone for the holidays. The heat was broken. The pipes had frozen. I sat there in that cold, empty space, wrapped in 3 layers of sweaters, staring at a blank canvas, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No inspiration. No fire. Just exhaustion. I whispered into the silence, maybe they were right. It scared me how much I meant those words, but then, something inside me rebelled. Like a spark flaring up in the dark. I dragged that canvas to the middle of the floor and started painting with numb fingers. Not carefully, not neatly, just raw. Streaks of black, violent reds, jagged whites. I painted until my hands cramped, until I was sobbing and shaking, until the canvas looked like the inside of my own shattered chest. When I stepped back, I realized something. That painting wasn't pretty. It wasn't polished. But it was real. It was me, and somehow, it kept me going. The turning point came in my third year. One of my professors, unlike the others, actually saw me. Her name was Professor Ramirez, and she had this no-nonsense attitude but a kindness that slipped through when you least expected it. During a critique, she stood in front of one of my abstract pieces, a swirl of stormy blues and fractured silver, and instead of dismissing it, she nodded slowly. "Carter," she said, adjusting her glasses. "You feel in colors. That's rare. Don't let anyone beat that out of you." Her words stuck to me like glue. For the first time, I felt validated. Like maybe I wasn't crazy. She later pulled me aside after class. "There's a gallery downtown looking for student submissions. You should apply." I almost laughed in her face. Me? In a gallery? I was the girl painting in a freezing apartment, surviving on ramen noodles. But she pressed the card into my hand and said, "Do it." So I did. I submitted that raw, broken painting from my winter breakdown. I half expected them to reject it outright. Instead, I got an email 2 weeks later. "We'd love to feature your work in our upcoming showcase." I sat in front of my laptop, mouth open, hands trembling. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was moving forward. The night of the showcase, I stood in that little downtown gallery, heart pounding, wearing the only decent dress I owned. My painting hung on the wall under a single spotlight. Strangers, real strangers, were standing in front of it, tilting their heads, murmuring to each other. A man in a suit stopped me as I passed. "You're the artist?" I swallowed hard. "Yes." He smiled. "It's powerful. Raw. How much are you selling it for?" Selling it? The thought had never even crossed my mind. I stammered, I don't know." He chuckled. "Start with $1,000. $1,000. More than I made in a month at the diner. By the end of the night, it sold. When I got back to my apartment that night, I sat on my mattress clutching the check, tears streaming down my face. Not just because of the money, but because it was proof. Proof that my parents had been wrong. Proof that what I had inside me wasn't a waste. That night, I whispered to myself, "This is only the beginning." And I was right. When that first painting sold, something in me shifted. It wasn't just the money, though believe me, that check felt like salvation. It was the validation. The proof. The sudden realization that what I had been pouring my soul into all these years wasn't just messing around with colors, like my mom once sneered. People saw me, and more importantly, they paid for what I created. The next few months felt like a blur. That small downtown gallery asked for more pieces. Word spread. Another curator reached out. Suddenly, my inbox, once a desert of overdue rent reminders and student loan statements, was filling with opportunities. I was still broke, don't get me wrong. For every piece that sold, there were weeks of uncertainty, of eating instant noodles and praying the subway wouldn't break down on my way to a shift. But the difference was, there was hope now. Every sale was a spark. Every compliment was fuel. And every time I walked past someone staring at my painting with furrowed brows and wide eyes, I felt a piece of my broken 18-year-old self healed. It wasn't all glamorous. Success didn't come wrapped in ribbons. I worked myself raw, painting until my wrists ached, staying up until dawn, dragging myself to work at the diner with paint still under my nails. I lost track of how many canvases I ruined, how many breakdowns I had staring at a piece that just wouldn't come together. There were critics too. Some called my work chaotic. Others said it was too emotional. But strangely, those words didn't cut as deep anymore. Because for every sneer, there was someone else who connected. Someone who got it. I'll never forget the night I saw my name in a newspaper for the first time. It was a tiny blurb in the arts section, promising young artist Emily Carter showcases raw emotion in her latest series. I sat in my little apartment, the clippings spread out on the floor, staring at my name in print. My heart raced. I wanted to scream, to laugh, to cry all at once. Instead, I just whispered into the quiet, "See, Mom? See, Dad?" I'm not a waste. But of course, they weren't there to hear it. Years passed, and slowly, the struggle began to balance with success. By 27, I had enough to move out of the crumbling apartment in Queens into a small loft in Brooklyn. It wasn't huge, but it had tall windows that poured in light, and space enough for a real studio. I remember sitting on the hardwood floor my first night there, staring at the blank white walls, thinking, this is mine. I built this with my art. Shows became more frequent. Galleries bigger. Collectors more serious. At 29, one of my paintings sold for $15,000. $15,000 for something I made with my hands. That sale was the first time I didn't just survive the month, I lived. I bought groceries without checking my account balance. I treated myself to a new coat instead of patching up the old thrift store one. I walked into the art store and bought supplies without guilt. It felt like freedom, but success has a strange way of echoing. It reaches people you thought you'd left behind. It started small, an email from my mother. Just one line, I saw your name in the paper. I hope you're well. I stared at the screen, my chest tight. After years of silence, after disowning me, this was all she had to say. I didn't reply. Then came the calls. Unknown number, again and again. I didn't answer. Finally, one night, my voicemail pinged. It was my dad's voice. Emily, it's your father. We'd like to see you. Maybe dinner? Call us back. My hands shook holding the phone. Dinner. As if we were just some normal family. As if they hadn't told me I was wasting my life. As if they hadn't watched me leave with a suitcase and slammed the door on me. I didn't call back, but life has a cruel sense of humor. One evening, I was standing in a gallery during the opening of my latest show, champagne glass in hand, talking to a curator. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw them. My parents, they stood there, dressed neatly, looking around like tourists in a foreign land. My mom's hands were clasped tightly in front of her, my dad's jaw set in that familiar way. My stomach dropped. I hadn't invited them. I hadn't even told them about the show. But there they were, standing just a few feet away from a canvas I'd painted during one of my darkest times. When our eyes met, my mom's lips trembled into a hesitant smile. My dad gave a stiff nod. I froze. The curator noticed them too. Oh, Emily, are these your parents? She asked warmly. I forced a tight smile. Yes. The word felt foreign on my tongue. My parents walked over. My mom reached out first, touching my arm lightly. Emily, we're so proud of you. The words hit me like a slap. Now they were proud. Now, when strangers were clapping, when checks were being signed, when articles were being written. Where was this pride when I was painting alone in a freezing apartment, wondering if I was worth anything? My throat closed up. I couldn't speak. The curator, oblivious to the tension, ushered us all toward my piece. And then, as if scripted by some cruel playwright, it happened. Someone bought it. A man in a tailored suit signed the papers, handed over a check. The amount? $60,000.60,000. I saw my parents' faces as they realized the number. Their eyes widened, their mouths parted. I could almost hear their thoughts. That's more than our house is worth. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in front of them. I felt tall. That night, after the show ended, they cornered me outside. The city lights glowed against the wet pavement. My mom's voice wavered. Emily, maybe we were too harsh. We didn't understand. We just wanted you to be safe. My dad cleared his throat. We're proud of you. Truly. I looked at them, the people who raised me, the people whose approval I had chased like oxygen for so long. And for the first time, I realized something. I didn't need it anymore. After that gallery night, I barely slept. I lay awake in my loft, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding with a strange cocktail of emotions: triumph, bitterness, sadness, anger, and maybe, deep down, a flicker of longing I didn't want to admit. For years, I had dreamed of that moment. My parents seeing me succeed, seeing proof that they were wrong. And now it had happened. They'd stood there in shock as my painting sold for more than their mortgage. They'd told me they were proud, but instead of joy, all I felt was empty. A week later, they invited me to dinner. Just to catch up, my mom said over the phone, her voice sweet and cautious, like she was afraid I'd hang up. I almost said no. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe the need to finally close this wound, said yes. We met at a quiet Italian restaurant uptown. The kind of place with dim lighting and soft music, where the waiters spoke with thick accents and menus didn't list prices. My parents had dressed up, my mom in pearls, my dad in a suit. They looked older, smaller than I remembered. "Emily," my mom said warmly as I slid into the booth. "You look beautiful." I forced a polite smile. "Thanks." We ordered. We exchanged pleasantries. And then the silence stretched, thick and heavy. Finally, my dad cleared his throat. We owe you an apology," he said, his voice gruff. My mom nodded quickly. "We didn't understand back then. We thought we were protecting you. But we see now how talented you are. How successful. We're proud." There it was again. Proud, that word that had once been my holy grail, the thing I craved more than food, more than sleep. I put down my fork, my hands trembling slightly. "Do you know what it felt like," I asked quietly, "to hear your own mother call you a waste?" Their faces froze. My mom's lips parted, eyes shining with tears. My dad looked down, ashamed. I leaned in, my voice sharper now. "Do you know what it felt like to leave home at 18 with nothing? To work double shifts just to eat? To freeze in an apartment because I couldn't afford heat? All while hearing your voices in my head telling me I was throwing my life away?" Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't stop. "You didn't protect me. You abandoned me. You made me believe I was worthless unless I followed your plan." My mom's tears spilled. "Emily, we didn't mean." "Yes, you did." My voice cracked. "You meant every word. And you know what? Maybe I should thank you. Because every time I wanted to quit, every time I doubted myself, I thought about proving you wrong. And I did." The table was silent except for the clink of glasses and murmurs of other diners. My parents stared at me like strangers. Finally, I sat back, wiping my eyes. My voice softened. "I don't need your pride anymore. I don't need your approval. I built this life on my own. And for the first time in my life, I feel free." My dad's jaw tightened, his eyes glistening. My mom reached across the table, but I pulled my hands into my lap. We finished the meal in silence. When I left the restaurant, the cold night air hit my face, sharp and clean. I breathed deeply, like I'd been holding my breath for 15 years. Months later, the big moment came. One of my largest canvases, an abstract storm of deep blues and fiery reds, was auctioned at a prestigious gallery. The winning bid, $310,000. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. And in the back of the room, I saw them, my parents, watching with wide, stunned eyes. I didn't approach them. I didn't need to. Because the truth was right there, hanging under the spotlight, painted in every brushstroke of rage, love, pain, and defiance. I was never the waste. They were the ones who wasted years doubting me. Now, at 33, I stand in my Brooklyn studio surrounded by canvases taller than me, sunlight spilling through the windows. My hands are always stained with color, my clothes always smudged, but my heart feels lighter than it ever did in that suffocating Ohio house. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven my parents. The truth? Not fully. Maybe not ever, but I've moved on. And maybe that's the best kind of revenge, living a life so full, so unapologetically mine, that their doubts don't matter anymore. So if you're reading this, and someone has told you your dream is a waste, prove them wrong. Not for them, for you, because one day, they just might watch you sell your waste of time for more than their whole house.